Great day.
I know, here.
I
Oh, you keep going down.
Yeah.
Red, so it must be.
That'll teach you guys. Yours is like, oh, yeah, yours is blinking. No, it's like blinking red. Oh, battery.
Because I used to get.
So we'll just do.
That was gonna be my follow-up. I'm sure they were.
That's always the case. You try it an hour before and it all work and then you're like.
Oh. I don't know why I saw that. That coat is better. It wouldn't be a shame, so I don't think. That's right.
Right, seeing as it's 6:30, I'd like to go ahead and start our calling meeting to order. Everyone would join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll move right down to old business, 2.1, budget presentation to be continued.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Wow. So we're gonna get started. The first thing, obviously, we want to remind of our mission. We're here for inspiring all learners to achieve success. So I'm making sure that's top of mind. And then I want to do an expenditures update that you're going to see later when we go over all the expenditures with adult education. So there's been two things that have happened in the last, well, since Tuesday. Today's last day, so the last 24 hours. One is we did get a notification from Anthem that the top of the band is 6%. As you know, we budgeted 10%. So we reduced it to 7% in order to have some cushion with perhaps some hires with cash in lieu. Just making sure we don't get us so tight that we have no room. Okay, so that was a job. The other thing is, special ed director had been speaking to me over the last month or so, might have been 2 months, that at her meeting, she was hearing from the special ed DOE person that they need to talk to the superintendent about increasing tuition, especially for those, especially for those districts who do not budget at 100%. So when you look at tuition rates, we worked with Nancy hard with this budget and about how often do our students attend these special purpose schools? What's our average? And that's what we based this budget on. So I reached out to the Superintendent's Association at the time, and they were not aware of what was being told to the special ed directors. I also was at the Western Maine Superintendents in March and asked others, anyone else concerned, anyone else heard this? No one spoke at that time. So last week, it came up again, and I don't remember how we, so I checked with the association, so I went to check in again. And said, I'm concerned, and Nancy shared with me a clip from her meeting so that I understood what was being said. And I shared it with our association. So now we're this week. And on March 24th, there was an emergency to chapter 101 submitted. And right now there's a short window for public comment So it went in on the 24th. Public comment ends on the 3rd of April, and it's implementing April 10th. And what, yeah, exactly. So, what they are now going to look at emergency change of rule, and I did speak to the DOE representative that speaks at the DOE meetings. I mean, at the special ed director meeting I talked to them this afternoon to explain our major concern that this is happening very quickly. Superintendents were not notified. Yes, Nancy notified, but it was more discussion in her group. There was no information, and we usually do things with these topics in this meeting. So, the DOE sent out a notice on Monday, and I think some people, including myself, did not see it initially. If you go on to chapter 101, you can do public comment, and I did make a public comment today regarding our concerns, RSU4, the increase to our budget. So to be fiscally responsible, we need to be budgeting at 100% attendance. This means we have 19 students accounted for, and what does it mean if they attend every day? So what's going to happen is they're recalculating everything, and they're going to set a new tuition daily rate and do 12% off of that for attendance issues. Take the 12%. However, so what's happening is whatever the cost is for that student, we will be billed whether they attend or not. Because from what I talked to her name is Karen, but she Fraser, she explained that special purpose private schools are saying that they cannot stay open if they do not get the full tuition. I questioned that, and I told her how many in. Right? So the other thing is there are districts who have been able to do 100%. Right? But they don't have the level of students in special purpose school. And I also explained to her that if we could do it, we would do it, because then you would see a savings later. So these districts have been doing 100% and their students haven't been attending 100%, now have funds left over. We have not had that because we haven't been able to fund 100%. So in order to at least meet the 19 students we have, we had to raise the budget $279,000. Now, we had great news yesterday, right? We were all excited. We were happy that we got more state local funds offset the local. We didn't have an increase in our 8279, but the switch between local and state happened that the local is only going to have $195,000 impact. Well, we're not going to see that because of this increase for special education. It's a hot topic right now. It has been raised on many fronts. And from what I'm gathering, I don't believe the DOE understood the impact. In Western Maine alone, 50% do and 50% do not. So we can't be the only region that has this. So there may be more to come, but we didn't feel, because right now we suddenly got 2 new students at full tuition costs. We're going to be in the red. Okay. So if we didn't do this, we'd be in more. So those are 2 changes. I'm going to show you the impact. Any questions on that?
Yeah, is it an LD or is it
After,
just DOE comments?
yes, we go to DOE comments. You'll see the list and you can send me everything.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Okay. So if you want to write about the comments. So that's the impact since we last met. That's been impacted by. So the other expenditure that I want to dive into a little bit is adult education. And so Jim Palmer, our adult education director, is here. And so he's going to go through some slides and explain things to you. And Jim, when we get to the slide around the academics, can you go into your staff and things like that? I think you know.
Yeah.
Okay. And you need them like
Is this one?
Yeah. Oh, there's something. There you go.
Good evening. So I wanted to give a little bit of background about some of our graduate history. So prior to 2019, we averaged about 12 to 15 graduates a year. And as you can see, COVID kind of hit us a little bit as well, but we were down to 7 in 2019, 6 in 20, 5 in 2021, 5 in 2022, and we're anticipating at least 10 this year. So. And this is our enrollment from last year to this year, broken down by different categories. So the first category is academic, which is us offering the HiSET test, as well as the high school diploma, as well as dual status, where a student can recover credit from day school through the adult ed program. So those numbers have increased this past year as well. So when you look at the numbers that are there, the 14 doesn't mean that 14 students passed it. It means 14 students have currently been involved in preparing for it. So right now we anticipate probably 7 or 8 are going to complete it, but there's others that have prep work to do before they can be considered completion. And then the CASAS testing is so that's slowly replacing the AccuPlacer for students who want to get into college. A lot of times that's an entry exam, or they'll ask us to CASAS test a student. It's also involved in the workplace as well. We've CASAS tested people who are BIW. They like to have some kind of baseline as to what their level of math and reading is before they enter. So the academic piece is where our instructors spend a lot of time. We have 2 part-time instructors. One focuses primarily on the HiSET. The other one focuses mostly on high school diploma. There's a stipulation with the HiSET that you can't prep people for the HiSET and also administer the HiSET. So that has to be 2 different people. The next slide is workforce training. So we've offered quite a bit more than we have in the past. They're all certificate programs. So you can see first aid, defensive driving, computer training, college transitions, and refresher math. And we actually just had a refresher English signed up today. So that's the year-to-year increase in those areas. And then enrichment, that's all our courses that we offer that we either break even or we don't offer. So if we have I'm going to use cricket, for example, if we have a cricket class and we only have 4 signups, but we're going to lose money by paying the instructor for that, we don't offer that class. So a lot of those enrichments are the cricket class. Driver's ed is a big piece of enrichment. The state recognizes driver's ed as enrichment, so we put those numbers there. But we've had a big increase. It hasn't been a huge focus for me this past year. Workforce training and academic actually were bigger focuses for me, just because the state recognizes that more than they do the enrichment. So our total enrollment over the from last year to this year, as you can see, is 75 participants through all the programs, and currently with a couple months still to go, 208 participants for adult ed this year.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions?
So the 208 includes driver's ed participants?
Yes.
So we're going to skip, yeah, okay. So the expenditures, so we've talked a lot about on adult ed, as you can see, with Jim going to full time, there has been an increase in participation in our adult ed program, which is great news. And we still have work to do, and Jim is committed to that and has goals towards that. So we recognize that. We also talk a lot about, can we still fund a 1 full-time employee? So we talked a lot about that, and what you're being presented is 0.75% position, which I'm going to share the difference between the 2. But the overall cost from this year to next year is down 33,311, and that is due to reduction of 0.25 of the position. It's also reduction of clerical, so Jim is doing the administrative assistant stuff that needs to be done. And so he's really looked with us around being fiscally responsible, knowing that the ask locally for adult ed is increasing. And so we'll show you what that looks like. Okay. So I have a lot of rules. All right, so when I told you about adjusting the total expenditures, so you'll see that cost center 2, which is special education, is now up 13%. And so you can see the totals before we put adult education in is we're up $1.1 million, 169,770, which is a 5.49% increase. Then when we add adult education in it, we are at a 5% increase because of the decrease in our adult education expenditure. So how does that look against the revenue for adult education? So you can see here, this is what has been raised in the past locally. I think that's one might have to go.
Can we swap?
Make a difference.
It might be too close to this, yeah.
Put it on
Maybe
chat.
Sharon, I'll go. Sharon, would you like to? Oh, yeah, that made a difference just moving it. Okay. I think it's the echo from here. I think they're right. It's pretty much right. Okay.
Yeah, it's gonna, oh, I turned it off.
Oh. Okay. So. Yes.
I have to clarify question.
Yeah.
This is what I do.
Yeah.
So. At one point, there was a partnership with this.
Correct.
Is that still happening?
Yeah, it's not really a partnership. I do their program per diem. And I do some time at Lisbon, roughly 7 to 10 hours a week, and a lot of it's the data entry or testing, and then the field kill is separate.
Okay, so. It's not part of your RSU.
Correct.
So now if it's 0.75, the 0.25 is listed. So you can see, because I put here nutrition, this is gonna come up with additional local dollars. I wanted you to see the difference in the local where it was 1 full-time, because you may decide you want it at full-time. So that would be the cost, and then where it is at 0.75. So this is what the local has to raise in addition to fund the nutrition program and the adult ed program. Okay, so the nutrition is just to make them whole from their subsidy that they get, that reimbursement they get to their total cost, which we talked about last time. And then the adult ed, you can see going to 0.75, what the total is. And then at full-time would be the total of 110,000. So we're proposing 0.75. Any questions on that? Then we're gonna go back.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So points if I can see we're saving 24,000. Going 0.75, but we've done away with the clerical position for support. The program has got 300% participation compared to a year ago. Will probably continue to grow. Are you going to have the time at 3/4 to run our program the way it needs to be run?
I don't think I'll be able to grow it the way I want to grow it at 0.75. I'm real happy with the way we've grown this year. I'd like to even continue to grow it, but it is handcuffing a little bit.
All right. And so the enrichment classes pay for themselves. They don't, so any any members or any more students than what break even is a profit for the adult ed
Correct.
and goes in to offset administrative costs and other costs in the program.
Yeah, it goes into that general course fees line.
Right. So that's the place to grow that helps pay for adult ed. We can't grow it. Then,
And if I could answer a little bit of that too, Bob, that we're now involved in some grants with our hub. We belong to a hub of other programs in our area, which now we're receiving more money from them, which is workforce training and academics. So that's why I tried to put a little bit more focus on that, so we could get some of that funding as well.
okay. All right,
Good. You all done, Bob?
yeah,
Okay. And on the workforce training program, because we get compensated, must be from DIW or anybody that wants us to do the testing. Am I right?
No, that's a service.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a service. It's not anything that we are getting money from.
So this is, you were speaking about, so this shows the revenue that goes into adult ed. So we have local additional dollars. Then we have state subsidy, and you can see under FY 24 with the increase of asking the community for more local dollars will go into the formula for adult ed subsidy. So we won't see it in FY 24, but we'll see it in FY 26. An increase in subsidy based on the increase, but you have, it's like a 2-year delay. And then you'll see, just as Jim said, the $8,000 for general course fees. We put in there as well to offset what we are asking the locals.
It may be helpful to break it down by residents. So when I look at the numbers and the student fall, it would be really helpful to be able to see how many of residents come from sales residents. Because I think we see that in student enrollment data, but not seeing it on the adult, so it makes it really hard. It's like, okay, it really is impacting all residents. Just kind of looking at numbers, but that it's tough to put that. In the budget, are there funds to pay for? You're not doing all of you're not doing all.
Some I do. I primarily do the testing for high set and CASs.
And there's funding in the budget.
You see it in detail. If you look at the detail of your adult ed handouts, you'll see the different categories of classes that Jim was talking about. They have a different code on that, 300, 600, and those lines have their associated construction fees and deductions.
So now we're going. So any more questions on adult education?
Katie, this is Laura. I just have one.
Laura?
I was just curious at how much has been put into the positive for the last 2 years for the financial piece for the enrichment. I think it was Bob that was mentioning that there was, once we make more than what it costs to have the people teaching the class, that goes towards the positive.
How much revenue have you made?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so during COVID, we basically stopped enrichment courses. So over the past couple of years, we haven't had any revenue in the enrichment, but as Bob mentioned, that's a place to grow with some different programs. I talked to Katie about offering some trips that some other programs offer to help boost that revenue. So that is a way to get some more revenue.
Do you know when the last time revenue was added to that program from enrichment courses,
Added to which program?
the adult ed?
When's the last time we had revenue from enrichment?
Yes.
That's the question. It probably, I'm guessing, but without looking at my book, 2018.
And was there an agreement? I know you said there wasn't really an agreement with Lisbon, but was there agreement happening with Gardner?
No,
And then does it make sense to have maybe some of the food director that we're outsourcing to Lisbon be part of this? And does it even make sense to keep the director position versus incorporating maybe an additional position within the high school? Just my thoughts.
Anything else? So we're switching gears to ED 279 overview. I'm just giving you a copy of, we're not gonna go line by line. What I've done is, right, because it's a formula. So you can look at it, you can, but I'm gonna give you the highlights from it. And it changes.
Yeah. Read it. Understand.
So I highlighted the changes that impacted us this year. And one was, we did have an increase in secondary students at 13.5, which helped on the first page when they're calculating our per pupil. So you saw secondary go up in quite a few categories because of that. But overall, our per pupil cost did increase because they also increased, the DOE increased computation of benefits. They hadn't done that pretty much, I think, since the beginning of this formula, but they had an increase, and I really, so in prior years, under benefits for teacher, guidance, and library, they had used the percentage of 19% and it's gone to 26%. For education and library technicians, it went from 36% to 40%, and from clerical, it went from 29% to 40%. So because they upped that, that allowed the per pupil cost to go up. Right? So that was a big change. So we had an increase in our secondary. However, overall, we had a decrease of 13 students, and we really are hustling to keep our enrollment numbers. I mean, NJ and Jordan and Vicky and everybody, the administrators were really working hard to make sure we had every student accounted for accurately. And so the next part that was heavily impacted was the weighted disadvantage. So once you get the per pupil, right, and you get the number of students, then they start giving you some more money for different categories. And so what in 2022, they raised that weight to 20 cents per student. This year, they returned to 0.15, 15 cents. That impacted us by losing $350,000 in the formula. We were not the only district. Yeah, so they went back to pre-COVID numbers. Everybody across the state is not happy about that rate change. It impacted everyone. And so that we made up with it a little bit when we had an increase of $169,795 for other subsidizable costs, thank you, for special education high cost, and transportation. So we did have an increase in that category. And then, as you heard, the mill rate went down from $7.10 when they originally had it up at $7.29 and brought it down to $6.90. 97. Okay.
Okay, it's like, yeah, we'll fix it.
We'll fix it.
Yeah, if you look at your source page, it's 0.97.
We'll fix that. So those were the highlights from the ED 279. And then we go into, what does that mean? So the next slide really shows where we've been with state funding, what the difference has been, and then the local funding, what the difference has been, and you can see a big impact in FY 22. And that would have been a bigger impact without the economically disadvantaged adjustment. But I was also noticing where the budget is, what the money is. If you look at FY 24, it's not even back up to FY 21. So it's been fluctuating. And then we had the increase of 125,000 this year. So this is giving you an overview of where we've been with. Then you look at what is the difference with the local contributions by town. As you can see that. And then we went over this already. So I'll have Sam go over what does this all mean? What is it going to cost us for our budget this year that you propose?
So,
He didn't give you the money, I know.
I tried to keep this as similar to what you've seen in the past.
I have a question
yeah.
about first.
Yeah.
You're looking at your state and local contribution.
Mhm.
So in fiscal year 24, you have a total difference of 125, but I think the difference is adding the 70 and the 195. But we have to pick up an additional 195 and we get 70 less. So that would make the difference 265, like that.
In the bottom corner, is that what you're looking at?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, to become whole.
Yeah.
Right, you would have to add the numbers.
The overall budget. The overall formula is up 125.
On the 82%.
Well, yeah, but the state contribution is 70,000 less, right?
This,
Right, and the local contribution is 195,000 more. So for the local portion, it has to be the sum of those two numbers. Be the difference.
okay, so the total budget, which this does not have on it, Bob, that's probably where the total allocation is 17,050,781.13 cents. The local contribution is 6,012,554,033 cents. The state contribution is $11,038,226.80. That's on the 8279. So I was trying to show the difference year to year.
Right, but the amount that the locals have to pick up additionally is 265,000. The minus 70 that we don't get and the 195 more that we have to raise to
Yeah.
get 70 less.
So for the local in the 8279 is up 195, yeah. go ahead. No, slide top, right there. Right, so the local has to come up with 195,761.01
More to get $70,000 less from the state,
to,
right? The state's giving us 70,000 less as long as we raise 195,000 more.
no, the state dollars are down 70,000
Right.
from last year.
I'm looking at what we're gonna have to pay locally in the required, not the additional local. So in required, we have to pay 195,000 more,
761,
195,000.
yeah,
I don't care about the penny.
yeah,
It's even up there, I'm not quite sure, but 195,000 more, and if it, that $195,000 is actually going to get us 70,000 less from the state. So,
But the overall.
yes, I hear what you're saying, you're right, you're
I
correct.
mean, so we're gonna have to raise 195, we're gonna get
Right.
70,000 less, so the real net difference to the community to become whole between those two is the 265. We're only gonna, we're gonna ask them for 195, but because we're getting 70 less from the state,
You're saying you're gonna make it up in the additional local.
you're gonna have to make
Yeah.
it that up
In
to
the
the
additional
additional
lot.
local.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it really is a lot, or an additional expense to the communities of 265. Because we gotta take that 70 that we're losing and show it someplace else. And we have to pay 195,000 to get it. So. All right,
okay, so, let it come, so. In what you're saying, and I think on this graph, it shows you the last one, you have the required local share, which is the 8279 local share, is that first line. The second line is the additional local share beyond what you need to raise for the 8279. And then you have the adult education and you have the school lunch for a total for each community. So the first line is the 8279, second line is the additional, then the adult ed, and then the school lunch.
Are you looking at
You
it?
have that in your slide.
Yeah, 15. Yeah, so the handout that you have, this one right here, that's the same as what's on the slide. I just put it on the slide so it would be there, just so it'd be a little bit easier for you to read. Yeah, but it's the same information. And so, like I was saying, I tried to keep it as similar to what you've seen in the past, so it feels like you're looking at, apples to apples, thinking about what was presented last year. So it has a side-by-side comparison of what was adopted for FY 23 and what we're proposing for FY 24. And I'll just pause there and mention that, like, 3 significant impactful changes to the budget in 24 hours. So if there are some errors, happy to look at it again, make changes. If you catch something, like, please let us know, because just lots of changes, lots of moving parts in the last 24 hours. Like, for me, the emotional roller coaster, the first budget I put together like yesterday, a couple of great things to celebrate. And then, today really analyzing that potential rule change. So, we're trying our best to get you as accurate numbers as you can review with those significant changes. So like I said, if you catch something that, we didn't put our eyes over in the last, few hours of prep, just let me know. But like I said, the first column that you have there, this is broken out by town. So you have Litchfield, Sabattis, and Wales separate initially, has the proposed revenue for FY 24. So like Bob mentioned, and like Katie mentioned, that first row in all 3 of those is what we have to contribute to get the state dollars, right? So like Bob was saying, we have to pay more for them this year to get less from the state. But if we don't raise those, we're not going to get that matching. Or not matching, we're not going to be able to get the contribution from the state. And then looking at what remains to be covered from the budget, we do have other, lines of revenue. We have miscellaneous revenue. We have, our main care reimbursement. We have all of those pieces too, but we wanted to focus on the local tonight because we know that's the taxpayer impact. So we can go over those at a different point, those other pieces. But if you look at the second row, you're looking at the additional local share. So that's, what we need to kick in, to help meet the budget. And then separate from the general fund, or the fund 1000, you have adult ed and school nutrition, which sits outside of our general fund. So those are spelled out. They've been held out separately in the past, so I tried to keep them out separate as well. Just so you can see those individual impacts and the difference over the previous fiscal year. So if you look at those kind of bolded at the bottom of each section, you know, that's your total local, from the municipalities. And then if you go down to the all towns, that's putting it all together and looking at the difference over last year. And then the final part there on the bottom, you know, we're thinking about, these are estimates. Remember, these are estimates, and each town's budget is made up of more than just the school, right? So there's other impacts that go into the town, so that very specifically want to call out the words estimated there, right? So for a mill raise, and this is my best information at this point, for Litchfield, you're looking at just over 390,000 to raise a mill. 362 in Sabattis, and then 127 in Wales. So with the increases that you see above, you know, that's your estimated mill increase, and then on different valued homes, that's your estimated tax. I just want to emphasize estimated.
Well,
Looked a lot better before the blue change.
estimated is only estimated at the town's mill rate requirement, but as far as the school portion goes, this is the actual.
Correct,
Okay, so these aren't estimated
correct.
because it says impact of RSU4. So these
Yeah,
numbers
but-
wouldn't be estimated there, but for the town's overall.
Yep.
Budget,
Just my first time through, I just want to put out there, like, that 391, 362, and 127 that you see there. I have not verified that with every town.
Oh, okay.
numbers when we can test. That's why it's necessary. That's what the
Right.
numbers were
Yeah.
last year, but we don't know what that number is
Yeah.
until we.
Until town meeting. and-
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
but for the
We have to
school
do all
itself.
of these, that's it.
Yeah, the numbers,
Reassessing, yeah.
yeah, the numbers above though, Bob,
Yeah.
you're right, though, the numbers above, those are the actual split out by town.
It would be helpful also, because we normally see it in our budget booklet.
Yeah.
That for each town, it shows the state amount. That we're getting, and then it shows the amount required.
Okay.
And then it shows the additional local. That way people can see how much state money they're
Okay,
getting
so like the
for
state award by.
for
town.
their-
Okay.
their contribution.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
I can look in here and see that Litchfield's gonna get 5,530,000. If they come up with 2.7. Sebastian will get 8.6, they have to raise, 2.3 million.
Yeah,
Wales will get almost 2.9.
yeah, so just pulling it right from the 279.
Right,
up in there.
just
Yeah,
put that in, and that shows,
yeah, that's good feedback, thank you.
We'll know more about this. So people so that will be done before we go.
them, I guess I'm. In all my years, it was never explained that we didn't budget special ed outplacement at 100% of the cost.
Yeah,
Right,
so-
and that's probably why we have come up short on special ed. In some budgets, we've had to transfer some money because we didn't fully fund it. But I can understand the point in doing it. Because if you send a student to an outplacement center. They don't show up one day. All of the instructors and ed techs and OT and PT, that schedule's gonna be in there, and they gotta get paid. So I can fully understand why they expect to be paid, just like daycare. If you
Correct.
if you don't take your kid to daycare, sorry, it's the same amount. So it makes sense to me that it should be funded at 100%. But I thought that's how it was always done.
Are there any other questions or concerns? Laura?
So obviously, we have, on April 12th, you're supposed to vote on an approved budget. You have next week, if you want to continue to talk and so forth, we can talk this evening, is there things you want adjusted? Do you feel, we'll reiterate, we really worked hard that this budget does not have a lot of wiggle. we took out a lot of the wiggle room to bring it in to a place we thought would be supported. Rather than coming in big, knowing you're probably going to say, go back. We were like, okay, let's really talk about every single line. As we explained, there have been things in there that are there because it can help in case of emergency, for example, the lease payments for a bus and the lease payment for technology. We took that out, and that is writing right now and helping out in the areas that were not budgeted. So this is very lean. So my fear is if you say, well, you gotta go leaner, it's gonna be difficult. You know, we're already reducing a position at the high school, 2 elementary positions in this budget. So, right, yeah, and 2 ed tech and a food service worker. So if we don't, and a bus driver position, well, that's part of a reconfiguration. But yeah, so I mean, I hope you've noticed that we really went through and looked at every pass, looked at and adjusted to bring it in a what we believe is a sweet spot for the community. There isn't a whole lot of, well, I'm noticing this line. Why isn't that high? You know, history shows you haven't spent it. We really looked at those lines. So there isn't a whole lot of ribbon in case something, if you get 3 extra special ed students next year, we're gonna have to watch that.
Our auditors have said they were always like 98% efficient,
Right,
so we've never had any wiggle room. And so when you start taking out some of those things that maybe we didn't spend here, but we spent somewhere else. I think Robbie, you probably remember that almost every year since the RSU, at the end of the year, we have to transfer some funds from one or more accounts to another one because it's short. So I don't want fluff, but I want realistic numbers. And we have to be able to support what we take to the community. You know, it's 5% overall, and then actually when we get to the town meeting, it's gonna be the 5.49. All right, because that's school, and then the adult ed will show a 21% decrease. All right. You know, our goal is to educate our students and give them the best chance of success throughout their life. And I'm hoping between this and a review of our CIA team, course requirements, that we can provide them the education that will allow each student to follow the path that they want to follow in the best form that they can. So don't try and cram trigonometry down somebody who's going to go to work for his dad and wants to, you know, shop on their own, and that's what they're going to do is inherit the shop, and they don't need trigonometry to do that. So just have to be smart on how we educate our students. Having lived in Europe for 11 years, you know, in various countries, and looking at the European education system, kind of dual track, made a lot of sense. We don't do that here because my generation thought everybody went to college and could take them all be teachers. Back in the 60s and 70s, that was the big push. And so we thought everybody needed to go to college, and the ones that go to college, we said, no, we're not.
Yeah, I was happy to see that we left the feasibility study in for our building, and I am a little bit concerned about the deferred maintenance things that we did, but I have enough faith in Jonathan to know that he put a lot of thought into those things. And I'm really not happy with cutting the adult ed director the quarter time, 3/4 time, because I think the program is just starting to come back. I mean, just by looking at the numbers, now that we're past COVID, I think people want to get out more and they want to start doing some activities. And I think by, you know, some trips or some other community activities. I think that's a bridge to the community that is greatly needed. So I am a little concerned about that. But otherwise than that, I think, you know, you guys have done a pretty good job of giving us the best numbers that we could deal with. So,
I think, at one of our meetings, we had a board up and we had sticking on it. We were, I think my big thing was 5%. I can do it. Done.
So the questions, do you want to meet next week? Or are you prepared about?
I would, I think it would give us a chance to look at the whole package.
Yeah, we'll prepare some, you know, some of the things you asked for. We'll do the whole revenue, including fund balance at 400,000. We can do that again. So we'll do some revenue, and if there's anything else you want to make sure we cover, then just send it our way, and then we'll meet next week. And, send it off.
So, sorry, it's Laura. I did put on the chat, but I don't think anyone saw that.
No.
I just am concerned about bringing these numbers with the budget. So, and I don't know, did you say we talk again next week or?
Yeah. Gonna meet
Was that
next
again?
week.
Sorry.
We're gonna meet next week at central office at 6:30.
Okay, so send you a list of things. Like I just am not entirely kind of sure with like the school lunch program before it was like 140,000 of people that didn't meet the guidelines paid for their lunches, and just asking taxpayers to pay that when people or caregivers or whoever pays can afford it because they're not within the guidelines. Like, why don't we just have people pay for their kids' lunches that don't meet the, you know what I mean, instead of raising taxes for it? Like, just things like that. I don't know.
The law right now is they're free for every breakfast and lunch.
We have free breakfast and lunch for everybody, so we're not making revenue because we don't have those paid lunches.
Right, so why don't we just have parents that can pay for their kids' lunches, pay for them and not ask taxpayers? Like, they're not really free, right? Because they're taxpayer funded. So whether the state, and I use air quotes, uses taxpayer dollars to pay for those, or we ask the local to pay for them, or if you don't meet the guideline to get your kid a free or reduced lunch, then you just pay for it.
Right, but I think what we're saying right now, everyone meets the guidelines because of the law. And the subsidy that we receive from the state has never matched what we need for the budget for the school lunch accounts. And so if you go back through the documents from last time, you'll see that historically, you know, we have asked for around $140,000 from the taxpayers. It's just been in recent years that amount has been reduced. So we're bringing it back in line with what it has been in the past, and a little bit extra to kind of match inflation for increased food costs. We're all experiencing that. It's not, we're not immune to that in the school system. And then additionally, when we met last time, we sort of made a big promise that, you know, Kathy, working with the new food service partnership through Lisbon, was going to be working hard to try to find ways to build $50,000 worth of food sales and revenue back into that budget. And I'm happy to report, you know, she came into my office today and said, I've already got a plan. I know what we're going to do, and I think we're going to hit it. So she's been hard at work, just trying to acknowledge that is, you know, an ask of the taxpayers. It's a historical ask. It's not something that's new or out of bounds. But that is not a self-sustaining program. It's not an enterprise account. That's why, you know, it doesn't stand on its own 2 feet. And that's why we had to ask for that taxpayer funds, even when we were generating daily sales at a higher rate when, it wasn't free for all.
Yeah, 'cause
And then you had food service debt
Right.
because people don't pay.
right. And then we're not allowed to charge enough to cover the cost of employees, benefits, salaries, food costs. In order to make that a profitable account, even people that would pay for their lunch wouldn't cover that.
Right, there is a maximum that we can charge. And it does not cover the cost, never has. Every time they adjust that, it's because our other costs have gone up more than that, so if everybody paid, we still wouldn't break even.
Yeah.
We'd still have to get some funding because the cost that we're allowed to collect is less than the cost to put on the meal.
And it will go down more next year because we're still in the COVID land of reimbursement and we don't know what that number of a reimbursable cost will be for next year. So that we already know we'll go to pre-COVID.
Because are we charging the maximum, Katie? I mean Kathy?
We have a set, I put it in the slide, I can go through, but it shows you what the breakfast and lunch is
Right.
on the, and what we get for
Right, yeah.
reimbursable. Yep,
Yeah.
those three. So right now, our only revenue is adult meals.
Right.
I will say, like, we charge right now 35 cents for milk. It costs me 32 cents. So
Yeah.
it, one of the things in my plan is, okay, can we ask for if people are getting an additional milk to go up to 60 cents so we can actually make those differences. Coming back, I have to figure out, there's a special formula to figure out adult meal. Because it depends on what you're serving. I'm looking into what that formula is. It's pretty complicated, but I'll come back to you and increase the adult meal. And as
And
You know,
adult, and when you say adult meal, you mean staff
staff,
or anybody coming in during the day?
volunteers, or
Right,
yeah,
sure.
different things that people that are spending. So we haven't looked at that formula
Yeah.
in a couple of years, so we'll look at that. And as Sam said, I already have a list of a draft of how I can increase revenue for that, at least to meet that 50,000.
Yeah, and the reimbursement amounts currently for breakfast and lunch are on page 7 or slide 17 of your previous
Mhm.
handout, the one that went over cost centers 8 through 11. So it's just over $2.60 for breakfast and $4.56 for lunch. As Kathy mentioned, we anticipate that going down a little bit. And so we know too, not only in nutrition, but also, across the budget as a whole, if, we're trying to bring the costs and expenditures way down, we know that we have to be extra vigilant next year about how we're doing with our expenditures, things that come up that maybe we didn't anticipate and accommodating for that. So Kathy and I both know we need our eyes on this, pretty consistently, and Allison from Lisbon is reviewing this and making adjustments throughout the year if we're not, bringing in those savings. We would like to anticipate if the revenue or the state subsidy changes dynamically. If we need to shift things, we're aware that we need to be nimble because there isn't a lot of wiggle room.
And last year I did write a few grants. I got an Oakhurst grant for like 27,000. I already have 4 grants that are going to be submitted to get fresh fruits and vegetables. So kids can have fresh fruit and vegetables as a snack. So outside of the time we are implementing it at the middle school this year, but we can charge some labor as well as some equipment to prepare for those things. We'll be looking again for some of those Oakhurst pieces, whatever. So I'm constantly looking at those grants and how I can offset some of those costs as well.
Yeah, and there's also grants that may become available in the fall, I think you mentioned last time, for specifically food service equipment. And so if those are funds that we can receive and utilize, that would, replace some of our expenditure lines in the 2930 accounts, and we'll plan to do that as best we can as well.
I know you said something in the past about a la carte. Is the a la carte going to be able to get the high school? It's going to be at the middle school? How are you?
Yep, so there's a couple of things that we're looking for a la carte. We know that there are some high ticket items that we're looking at increasing ice cream. Like already pre-made ice cream for middle school, high school. I have to work with Marco. He doesn't even know this yet, but there's a vending machine. So there's certain items that you can serve that are serve safe that I can fit into the requirements. And so we would be looking to do a vending machine at both the middle school and high school to meet that need. And also like some other items at the high school, like beef jerky, tends to sell pretty high. So we're looking at some of those pieces and even doing pizza as a la carte versus as the meal. And so because my pizza is popular, and so that would be an a la carte every day as well as the hot meal. we're also done a better job this year with inventory. So in the past, it used to be a spreadsheet. Now we're using Asset Panda. We're gonna move into the Mosaic next year. We went through and met with the managers today and looked at our government food to see where we could, utilize some of the other pieces, like how much chicken we had left. So we were trying to make our menus for the next 3 months based on the materials. Some of it is a moving piece. I get my commodities in and then I gotta adjust my menu. It's a moving target. I went to 4 places looking for dairy-free shredded cheese this week and had to make some accommodations for some of our special dietary restrictions. So it's not a perfect match. It's quite a moving part, but we're keeping an eye out on it better than we ever had.
Yeah, I would just like to make sure that by moving some things to a la carte where we're gonna collect, that we're not denying the student who through no fault of their own doesn't have the money to go and eat as well, or to have some of these things that the other students who are a little more affluent. Because it's not that third grader's fault that his parents are, have been in an unfortunate situation where they can't afford to pay
We'll
for
still
the.
have pizza option once in a while, but we're just not gonna have pizza. Sometimes we have pizza and a hamburger and then a hot meal. We're
Right.
just gonna reduce some of those options and be really methodical about how can we make some money for that.
Which will probably help on food costs.
Correct. Yeah.
A la carte would only be at middle and high.
A la
Well,
carte, yeah.
I mean,
okay, I could have said 8th grader as well as a
Yeah.
third grader.
Yep.
Same scenario, same situation.
The beauty is we've been working with other districts to figure out what's working and what are the best, pieces to start with a la carte, for middle and high school. And we'll kind of go from there, but Carrie Ricker, we noticed has too much on their salad bar for what we have, so we can reduce the costs there. So there's just little things that we're, making an impact, being tighter.
So I know it hasn't been an issue since all the meals have been paid for. But what was the non-payment number? Because I know sometimes we had talked about 10,000,
We
20.
were less. Actually, I was about halfway through today to look at, met with Nora Jean just today about that, is looking at what our previous balances were in Infinite Campus, and we're rolling them over into Mosaic.
Yeah.
I will be reaching out to parents if they have balances. We do have some students that have $400 worth of balance. We have some that are 25 cents. So we do have that balance that hasn't been paid or hasn't even been looked at since 2019.
Right.
School year. So I can give that number next time.
Okay.
I started to work through, I made through 3 out of the 5.
So sorry, Laura again. So Katie, for the, we all kind of know about the building, and how that went with the residents of each of the towns. And, what is a recommendation or thought around, if there is a group of anyone in each of the towns, so a group of like Sabatis residents that would not support anything but a 0 increase, what is the discussion with that?
Well, the board would have to agree that they would like to go to a 0. Now, if the board agreed to that, we would put together a list, cut 1.7 million.
Which would be teachers. Yeah, right. Program. Yeah, teachers and programs would take the biggest hit.
So we would have to cut 1.1 million. Plus what the adult ed cost, yeah, and the nutrition cost would have to factor that.
Anything else, Laura?
Thank you.
I was just gonna ask, we got local, produce from around here.
Yep, so we actually get, I think it's like 30%. I'd have to go back, but I think it's 30% up to 5,500 for local produce. So there are grants and things that we have to do and some reimbursable. We do get, apples from our local orchards and things like that. So when we can, we do, but it's a certain amount, and then we try to use the government food if we have to. So we're watching those numbers very closely all the way through. But yes, we do buy local when we can in the season.
All right, so now I'm gonna task us all to come next week, with your questions, concerns. So I'd like to just go ahead and adjourn the meeting if there's no objection.